So before you go out and buy all of the fabric in the store because, you're all excited and just getting ready to start sewing for the first time and sew your own clothes, here are some fabrics that you should really, like what you want to look for in fabrics that will just make sewing and learning sewing easier, because you don't want to make this harder than it has to be. Trust me, because we all end up picking the wrong fabrics at some stage, but I want you to have some sewing success here. My sewing friends, welcome back. It is so delightful to have you here again today. And if you are actually just here for the first time, then welcome. My name is Evelyn Wood and I'm the creator of VintageSewingSchool.com. And it is my mission to help people just like yourself learn to sew their own clothing and basically just make it way easier than it was when I was first learning, because I really want to see you sewing those clothes that you dream of. And I know you're probably watching this video because you're just getting started sewing and you're all excited, about to go to the fabric store maybe, because it's the second choice that we need to, right? You've got your sewing machine, and then the next thing is generally picking fabric. And well, it's very well known fact that as beginner sewists, we all pretty much choose the wrong fabric at some point, and it will happen, and that's okay. But let's talk about what to look for in fabric to make it easy for yourself. And I know you're thinking, but they might sound like boring fabrics. I want this fun, whatever it is, pretty one that you want. And yes, I totally get it. And you can absolutely choose any fabric that you want. The reason why you would choose, say, an easy fabric to begin with is just so that you can focus on learning everything else first, learning your sewing machine, learning all the different stitches, learning seam finishes, learning then cutting out patterns and using them, learning how to sew bits of patterns together and actually form a garment without having to also at the same time learn how to deal with a really slippery fabric, a shiny one, something that crumples up and just pulls in all the tension, something that's just awful. Like, you want to just focus on learning sewing first with some easy fabric. And so that's why choosing, like what I call like a 0.0, a standard, like the middle point, the starting point on fabric is like what you want to look for. And now I'm not going to necessarily name fabrics, so to say, because, well, that's all well and fine. But generally, as you probably already know, stores and places just tend to put random names on all sorts of things, right? And so whilst it is helpful to have names, actually knowing what you're looking at and looking for is really key. So that is what I am going to arm you with when we talk about the fabrics and what to look for, is in actually what to look for in the properties of the fabric. That way you're not just having to look online, and if it has a label on it, you're able to maybe know what it is. It means that you can also then rummage through the bargain bin section, go to the thrift stores, buy, all sorts of different fabrics. So that is why knowing what you're actually looking at in your hands is way more important, in my opinion, and will serve you way better in your sewing journey as a whole. So first thing you want to look for is what we call a plain woven fabric. And so a woven fabric is basically what we mean is no stretchy fabrics, right? So this is a knit fabric. Anything that stretches like this is classed as what we call a knit fabric. And there's a whole world of fabric terminology, but we're going to keep it real simple for today. A woven fabric generally doesn't stretch, right? It's just like, yeah, that's why. So, well, why is because these stretchy knit fabrics here, these actually require different needles and stitches and all sorts of things to actually sew them. If you look at garments that you own and that are made out of these kinds of knit fabrics here, they're actually made on entirely different machines, not on the standard straight stitch machine, which is what you have in front of you. So yes, you can absolutely sew knitwear at home, but it's just one level harder because you need different types of needles. You need to do different stitches, as I said, that actually stretch with the fabric. And so it's just one level way too hard. Just start with a plain woven. So look for those woven, plain woven fabrics that just really, they just they don't stretch. I think you know what I mean, right? So look for wovens. Now next, look for a medium weight woven fabric. Let me explain that a little bit. So The actual weight and what we mean generally refers to the thickness of the fabric. So how thick, how fine it is. You want something that falls in the what we call a medium category. Now, it's going to be a little bit easier than you think to decipher that. So what you don't want to look for is these thicker fabrics. Think like denim or heavy wool. Like these are just so thick. And so why you wouldn't want something like this is because once you start doing some seams and everything, it is so thick and bulky, and your machine will really have a hard time trying to sew so many of these thick, bulky layers. It just gets harder and harder. And you know, again, you want to keep it easy so you can focus on everything else. And on the other side, you don't want to go for something really lightweight, like really sheer and see-through, like chiffon or organza or something like that. You know, if you can see through it, it's probably not a good choice. These finer ones tend to be a bit more troublesome because they're so fine. Your needle can actually eat the fabric really easily. And again, it's just a whole nother thing to look for. So look for about that medium weight. So this one here is what's classed as a medium weight. And I've got more of that coming up, but look for those mediums. Next, you want to look for something that holds its structure. And so, well, this one's pretty easy to demonstrate here. So I've got 2 lengths of fabric, and I think you can already see this one here is just like not holding itself at all. If I try and do a drape test, you can see this cotton here is really kind of holding its shape, but this rayon is just like, you know, if I try and squeeze it into a ball, it stays there, right? So it just, anything drapey and soft like this, they are so nice and luxurious, and I promise you will definitely get to sew with these, but you want to start for something that holds its shape. So just something that actually holds its form like this. Not too much, but just not like this. Why this is because these really soft, slippery, drapey fabrics, although they are so gorgeous, they are going to be really difficult to even from the start, like when you lay them out and you lay your patterns to try and cut them out, they slip and they move, and it's really hard to even cut them out precisely. And then sewing it together, you guessed it, the same thing. They just slip, they drop, they move, and it's just really hard to try and navigate this fabric, as well as learn how to pin things together, learn how to backstitch, learn how to sew seams and your seam finishes. So you just want to make it easy for yourself. And these kinds of fabrics that will just hold its form like this one, just make it so much easier. And again, it should sort of, how do I say? So when you rub it between your fingers too, you want it to sort of slip a little bit, like it shouldn't be stuck. That's going to make it a little bit harder too, but you don't want it to be really slippery between your fingers either, because that will mean, again, you'll get all that slipperiness when you're sewing. So something that moves but has a little bit of stableness to it that doesn't slip too much is what you want in that. Generally comes with that structure as well. Okay, and one more thing to look for is I would recommend natural fibers. So generally a cotton or a linen is going to be your A1 number 1 choice when you get started. And there's a reason for that. And I have made another video here actually sewing and comparing cotton versus polyester and just what the difference is. The short version, and I'll link that video below, but the short version is that natural fibers, say cotton or linen, they mold, they ease, they flex, they sort of do what you want them to do more than polyester does. And so, because polyester is basically made of plastic, so it doesn't absorb moisture and it doesn't sort of bend and move like cotton or linen does. And so it's the small differences that if you pick a cotton, say over a polycotton or 100% polyester, you'll find that the experience of sewing will just be so much nicer. When you're ironing and pressing, it'll just work easier. And when you're putting in sleeves, for example, things like that, it will just work a little bit better than it will in a polyester, for example. So it is really helpful to go with those natural fibers just to make everything easier for you as you're getting started. And so now, with all of these things in mind, what kind of fabric then would fit the bill on all of those points? Well, that quilting cotton that you see at the sewing shop or the quilting store is actually quite perfect. It's usually the perfect sort of weight. It's a nice mid-weight. It is woven and cotton holds its structure, and the cotton obviously is going to be really nice to work with, and it is just really good start. Like, you can't go wrong with that one. So you could go ever so slightly on the finer, lighter side of the thickness and ever so slightly on the thicker side, but generally this is about the weight that you want to look for. And everyone can go to the quilting section and get an idea of what I mean by 100% quilting cotton. The other little trick that I have for you is thrifted bed sheets. So I love this for beginner fabric because one, it's really cheap, and two, it is sustainable as well. Using these secondhand products is really good, and it also takes the fear out of, you know, cutting into and testing fabric that you've spent maybe a lot of money on. You can get these quite inexpensive and you have less fear, so you just can go ahead and just practice better. So with your thrifted bed sheets, again, look for the cotton ones if you can. It will be better. Polycotton's okay, but 100% cotton is so good. And my big tip is to go for the poorer quality ones. So by that I mean, you know, the 1,000 count bed sheet aisle, and they're really quite thick and stiff, and ooh, that's the luxurious bed sheets, right? They're actually be harder to sew with because they have 1,000 little threads all jammed in together, and it's a bit less like dressmaking fabric that we use. So those poorer quality ones that are a bit softer and more flexible, that's the kind of bed sheet that is really, really good to work with. Now, I have other videos linked down below, particularly on how to even tell the difference between polyester and cotton when you're in the fabric store, and the sewing and the difference between them too, which I know will really, really be useful for you to get started sewing. And remember, this is part of a little series we're doing here on all these beginner tips. So make sure you are subscribed, because I've got lots more great tips coming up to really improve your sewing. So until next time, my friends, happy sewing. Bye.